What a night. Tonight. It feels like.
It is Thursday, the 9th of May. I'm Randy Kure. This is a What's Up the Sports podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are live on YouTube or if you are catching this episode on your favorite podcatcher, at What's Up Podcast is where you could find us on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, YouTube, you name it, we are on it. There is a lot to get through involving the Toronto Blue Jays. They are struggling during the early course of this season. The NBA and NHL playoffs are in full swing. Second round action is taking place as we speak. Prominent sports reporter from Indianapolis has been punished after an incident involving a WNBA star-to-be, Caitlin Clark, and a whole lot more. Joining us for the roundtable is Antoniou, as always. Tony, great to see you again. How are you?
Hi, I'm excellent. Great stuff. Hit my microphone. I'm good. How are you, Randy?
Doing well. Thank you so much. Dan Leggieri is always great to join us with a busy schedule. He mentioned how his son is dominating the baseball and soccer world, and on a rare week off, Dan is able to find some time for the roundtable. Dano, what's going on?
What's going on, Randy? Hello. Happy to be here, and I'll have more free time once he turns 14 and signs that underage max contract with MLS, and mommy and daddy can retire full time.
Now, are you and your lovely bride? Are you guys those kind of parents? Can you sense that in the years to come?
Oh, truthfully, I think my wife is more than I am. I'm a hot-headed Italian parent from the Woodbridge area, so I'm not shy to yell at any referee, 13-year-old girl or not. But my wife is more of the belief that he will make something of himself one day in the profession, and I just want him to learn piano and learn how to speak a different language.
Okay. Well,
sorry, Dan. If you want to shoot higher for an early retirement, I think an MLS contract is not enough.
No, probably not. But I'm a man of modest means, Tony.
Okay. Well, if Junior does make MLS Cup or the World Series, center pitch line would be great, or front row behind home plate. I mean, my standards are not that high, but as you can see. But Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. And despite being a proud member of Rangers Nation, and especially the fact that I reached out to him yesterday, making another appearance from Middletown, New Jersey. What's Up the Sports podcast is always gracious and grateful for Matt Siriani. Be sure to find Matty at Siriani Says Sports on the various social media. Matty, always appreciate you. How you been?
I've been great. I remember I messaged you when you gave me the offer to come on the show. I said, Rangers priority number 2, being on the show priority number 1.
I was going to ask you, between the four of us, you're the only one to have both your favorite basketball team and hockey team in the playoffs and in the second round. What's that like? And hey, talk slow.
It's great. The city of New York has not been this grateful sports-wise in a very, very long time. And it's not even just those two things. It's also the fact that the Yankees are doing well. They lost the Astros to not get the sweep today, but that's fine. They're still 26-14, 25-14. But New York finally has a presence in the sports world for the first time since, I think, 2000 or 2011. I know the last time New York won a championship was NYCFC in 2021, but people take MLS not that seriously here in New York City, New Jersey area. But no, it's great.
Yeah, well, hey, the Yankees I think won 2009, but it was somewhat
Yeah.
of a blip on the radar. But I mean, hey, on behalf of Dan and Tony, I mean the fact that it's been a couple of lean years. I mean, there was of course TFC and the Raptors, and we're always gracious for that. But hey, it would be nice if Lord Stanley can make its way north of the border. But hey, we definitely digress. I mean. The joys of organizing a podcast is that you may have an idea of what you're going to talk about, and then the sports world breaks some pretty significant news, and such is the case here in Leafland. Of course, the big news for today is that the Maple Leafs have parted ways with head coach Sheldon Keefe, despite having a very solid regular season record to the tune of 212 wins, 97 losses. I mean, that's not too bad at all. Of course, he did finish with a 16-21 playoff record and another Game 7 loss to the Boston Bruins. And, you know, Dano was, of course, going to ask your thoughts of the Leafs and the first round series. But I guess the better question should be, is Sheldon Keefe responsible for the Leafs coming up short?
Not necessarily, in my view. You know, I know he alluded to it from his farewell video from heaven this afternoon. That, you know, we're in a performance-based industry. Well, now we are. He is, and you know, playoffs are what matters. And he failed to deliver. He actually, you know, you can argue that he got out coached in a lot of the series that he was involved in the playoffs. But I thought he was a decent coach. I didn't think that he was ultimately responsible. I think, you know, the talk in Toronto is it's old news by now. Like, everybody's saying the same things, but it's true. You know, you got 44+ million wrapped up in 4 guys. You know, throw Riley in there as well, and they got to perform. You know, they can't be, you know, half point a game per or half point a game per player in the playoffs. Like, all of them. They you know, Matthews is you know, point plus half a point and a half plus in the regular season on average, and you know, he just doesn't have the same stats in the playoffs. He's not comparable to McDavid's or Draisaitl's or you know, anybody else who sort of elevates their game in those moments. Marner, the same thing. Nylander's been consistent. Tavares is, you know, maybe forgiven for being who he is, but it's easier to get rid of one coach than it is 4 guys. So something had to give. It was probably overdue by a year or two, to be honest, because you know, the futility that this franchise has shown for the past 7-8 years since Matthews came into the league, or since this core 4 was assembled. It hasn't been enough. So something's got to give. I'm not convinced that you know, Craig Berube, who the name that everybody's thrown out there as the obvious choice to take over, is the right choice. But again, I'm just a guy on a podcast. I didn't think that True Living was the right choice either. So I'm not necessarily convinced or confident with the direction that this group is going. But something had to give, and you know, Keefe was the obvious first step to at least show that you're going to try something new to this fan base.
You know, I was going to bring up this whole thing of playoff experience. Of course, Austin Matthews had 69 goals during the regular season, and Marner is well over a point a game during the regular season. But I mean, how many games did they score 2 or less goals? I mean, well, it was the entire series. They didn't make it past 3 goals. But you know, Dano, you were bringing up Craig Berube, and it's kind of interesting to hear the possible names that are being thrown out there. One name that I heard was Joel Quenneville. And you could say that Joel Quenneville has the resume of a Hockey Hall of Fame coach. He has 3 Stanley Cups. But of course, he was the coach in Chicago during the Chris Beach sex scandal. And he was about to, he was just starting his career as coach in Florida. Word got out, he was sacked. And I'm not sure if there was officially a suspension, but there's no chance that Joel Quenneville can, let alone with the Leafs, but get a job, especially so recently removed from the Chris Beach saga. Am I right on that?
I would think so. Yeah. Like, first of all, he's got to be reinstated by the league. So that would have to be the first domino where Gary Bettman and co would have to say that, yes, he is allowed to coach again in the NHL. I don't know that the Leafs truthfully would touch that PR nightmare, good coach or not, because I don't know. It seems like something that, this conglomerate of a business just doesn't want to deal with. We've trained our coaches and our players, our management to not have any personality, or to only say what needs to be said. Even if you look at the post-game interviews from Game 7 of the Boston series, or some of the cleaning up the locker interviews with the Leafs, they all said the exact same thing. So like their media training, their coaching off the ice is just as important as their coaching and training on the ice, it seems. So I can't imagine that they would go after that, as qualified as he may be as a coach. But, I would think that Joe Quenneville's road back to the NHL might start with, an organization that's not as much in the spotlight. Maybe if he goes to, let's say, Columbus, just for the first team that comes to mind, because they don't have a problem with hiring controversial coaches. But, they may be a spot where Quenneville can make amends, can show that he's a different person or whatever it may be. Everybody deserves a second chance for sure. I just can't see the Maple Leafs being the team to give him that second chance without somebody else doing it first.
Well, and Tony, I was gonna talk to you about Keith Pelly. Of course, he was recently named the CEO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Not only does he have the Maple Leafs under him, but of course the Raptors and TFC. And with regards to Joel Quenneville specifically, I mean, the three of us, especially Maddie, Keith Pelly has a very distinguished career in sports. Whether it's on the media side, or I think he was part of the Argos once upon a time. He was basically the media leader during the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. Keith Pelly was. But, Tony, I think Dan really hit it on the head. There is no way that Keith Pelly would even consider interviewing Joel Quenneville, especially since he's a month into this job as CEO of MLSE.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. That would be a tough one. He would be my first choice to coach my hockey team if a certain amount of remorse, or I would even know, we don't know the details exactly about everything that happened, how much he was in the know, how much he wasn't in the know. It's just you were part of the leadership group and something happened under your watch, and you should be held accountable for it. I get that. I believe he deserves a second chance. I think he's probably the best coach on the planet, not coaching anywhere right now. But for a market like this to take that on with the amount of media coverage, the amount of scrutiny that would be around it, they wouldn't be shy about asking him about it on a daily basis, and then it becomes a distraction. And but here's the thing: you could have a clone of Al Arbor, Punch In Black, Scotty Bowman, John Cooper, just to get a recent guy in there too, all rolled up into one. If you're going 14 playoff games in a row by not getting more than 3 goals, and you have $40 million plus locked into your core four, and they're not performing for you, and they're performing pathetically, quite frankly, it doesn't matter who's coaching the team. It does not matter. Sheldon Keefe took took the bite today, and we all knew it was going to happen. It's not surprising, and that's the way sports goes. But it's not going to change the makeup of this team and how they perform. Now, let's give them some credit. They battled hard in Boston in that series, and they got to overtime in Game 7. They showed some fight. I thought they were better defensively. However, um, you look at Game 4, which was their second game here in Toronto. If you don't have that despicable 40 minutes of hockey on your home ice when you're down 2-1 in the series, which allows the Bruins to go up 3-1, you might be looking at things differently right now, right? So again, whose fault is that? To me, that's the players. It's you can't have those types of lapses when you get to the playoffs. The best teams just don't do that. Not for 40 minutes anyway. You make mistakes here and there. So, like I said, you could have a clone of all these great Hall of Fame coaches rolled up into one. You find them, you hire them. It won't make a difference unless these guys step up.
Well, I mean, and the proof is in the pudding that you don't really even need NHL experience. I mean, take a look at Chris Knobloch, and yes, he had he had a past history with Connor McDavid in Erie, but he took a real struggling Edmonton team from Jay Woodcroft, who was, in all intents and purposes, doing really well the season before. And, they stumbled out of the gate. They turf Woodcroft, and then Knobloch comes in, and, they found those winning ways. And, I mean, look at John Cooper. I mean, John Cooper, I don't recall any significant history that he had before getting to Tampa, and now he's destined for the Hall of Fame. I think he's already punched his ticket. Yeah, I guess the question that, I mean, obviously, this is not even 12 hours old, this story, but I mean, do you think that the Leafs are going to get one of those coaches that does have NHL experience? I'm going to throw this out on the floor. Anybody want to jump in? But Craig Berube. I mean, what kind of experience did Craig Berube have? He took a team in dead last, winning and won the Stanley Cup, and was immediately fired. Like, how long did he last after St. Louis won the Cup? I mean, I don't even know if he lasted more than 2 seasons.
But that's the thing with this.
Yeah, no,
that's why I alluded to Brad Treliving, where they've tried that with Dubas. They brought in a fresh face. They brought in a coach with no experience, and they tried to go completely different from what anybody else in the league was doing at the time, and try to set a new standard for how to manage and operate a team. Brandon Pidram, if somebody can help me with his last name, all the analytics, all the different, they've got 5 assistant general managers. This is a front office that, under Dubas, was built differently. And I think Shanahan is going more traditional now, where, Dubas was out and Treliving was in within a couple of weeks. And I know that there was a crunch before the draft, but he's going for guys who, I don't know if he's relying on old boys network, or if it's just friends, or if it's just going by names, which is why the list of names who are going to take over as coach is so uninspired. It's Craig Berube, it's Gerard Gallant, it's Joe Quenneville. I've seen on some lists. It's all these names that have been around, and they're putting emphasis on playoff success, and they're putting emphasis on been there, done that. But to your point, Randy, I don't know that ultimately matters. And to Tony's point, if your players aren't playing, I can coach this team, and it was the same results, because the skill is there. Like, you can't deny that on paper this team should be performing much better than they are. There are maybe a few pieces away. I know that they don't have a top-notch goalie, but outside of not scoring more than 2 goals a game in 10 out of the 11 past playoff games, they played like a playoff team for the first time in 5-6 years this series against Boston, where they won 2-1 games. They would have won a third 2-1 game in a row if they won Game 7, because they were defensively sound. But they're still a team that just disappears. Game 2 and Game 4, they were abysmal, and they let Boston walk all over them. And this is a Boston team that came into the playoffs on such a low trajectory. They got like 10 shots on net against Ottawa in their second last game. They got shut out, I think, in their 2 out of their last 3 games, and like they were there for the taking. And maybe this is where you can blame the coach to say that, instead of encouraging guys to have fun, which isn't a bad message per se, but to not read the room and say, this is a team that's ripe for us to, make a mark on. This is a team that's put us down. We've lost these guys in 3 straight series. We haven't beat them in the playoffs since 1959. They're notorious for making us look bad. But now's our chance. This is a team made up of third-line guys, right? And outside of their goalie and their defense, we should be able to walk all over these guys. And maybe that's where the preparation and the coach didn't come in. So perhaps a Quenneville or a Berube, a more of a hard-nosed, back to basics, traditional guy might be exactly what this team needs. But I don't know. But I'm not confident that whatever decision they make is going to be the right one long term. I know that they're going to try to win in the next 3-4 years before things really go sideways. In the fact that contracts expiring and guys maybe aging out of their prime. But to the Rangers, and maybe we throw it over to Maddie, who's been quiet. But this is a team that was sort of built the same way, where just build with skill, build with good hard work. And they had to get a new coach this year too, right? Laviolette's is his first year, and now look what he's doing to the team. And this Laviolette's the same guy. Like I'm sure, I don't know what the feeling was like in New York, but it was maybe like, oh, this fucking guy. He's been everywhere. He comes in, he's on fire for a little bit, and then he gets fired. So I don't know how you guys felt about it, Maddie, but I'm not confident that they're going to make the right choice either way. And maybe I'm just being a cynical Leaf fan at this point.
Well, you know what, Maddie and Dan definitely set you up to take the floor. When it came to the hiring of Laviolette, I mean, he does seem to be a coach that is one of those coaches who starts out really strong and then wears out his welcome really fast. And we saw it with the Islanders, we saw it with Nashville, we saw it with Carolina. He won the cup in Carolina.
He won a cup in Carolina 06, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And look at what he's doing now. I guess the question, and Dan did bring this up, was were you excited to see someone like Peter Laviolette as coach? That would be number one. And if you weren't, do you think that there is this cycle of coaches getting multiple chances, and we don't see fresh blood like a Chris Knobloch in Edmonton?
Well, the thing with Pete Laviolette is he's an experienced guy. I mean, he's won 800 games as an NHL head coach, and he, like I mentioned before, he won a cup in Carolina, which, by the way, the Rangers are playing right now. So Pete Laviolette knows the NHL very well, and he evolves with the changing landscape of how NHL teams want to do things. The thing I'm going to say is, I think when Pete Laviolette got hired, I think people were kind of like, because remember, he coached the Islanders at one point. It was kind of like, okay, here's this guy again. We know who he is. We're familiar with him. He was part of the New York area at one point. What's he going to do here? And the first thing he does with the Rangers is he brings in discipline. And the Rangers have an act of giving you goosebumps every game because they have to come back every game. But, I mean, he's installed a toughness. He's installed a sense of urgency in this team. I mean, this is a Ranger team that for the last 2 years before this year, they made the Eastern Conference Finals in 22, only to lose to the Lightning. And then they made the playoffs last year, but they lost to the Devils in the Hudson River rivalry. So Laviolette, his experience would pay off as beneficial for a Ranger team that's kind of right there. And they won the President's Trophy with Laviolette. But my biggest thing with the Rangers right now, looking at Pete Laviolette, is how is this going to go long term? Because most coaches, like you said, this old school philosophy comes in, it works out well in the beginning, and then it just kind of fades away and it doesn't work out. And when you have guys like Matt Rempe, who's a rookie this year, when you have guys like Chris Kreider and Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad and all these other guys on the roster, how they'll mesh with a guy old school like Pete Laviolette, who's as old school as they come, it's going to be interesting to see. But right now, the Rangers, I think ultimately, let's see if they can win the Stanley Cup first. And get this President's Trophy schneid off their because the President's Trophy schneid. 8 of 37 President's Trophy winners have won the Stanley Cup. That's just over 20%. But if the Rangers can pull that off, I think people are going to look at the Laviolette hire and say, hey, we got our first Stanley Cup in 30 years with this guy. No complaints. But it's after that really is going to set the tone.
But, you're talking about discipline, and Tom Thibodeau is a guy that definitely seems like a hard-nosed coach. And look at what he's doing in New York. I guess the question is, how long does that discipline and how long do that coach's players listen? Because as we're seeing it now, it seems like it's that kind of grit and grind and expectations amongst coaches doesn't seem to last very long.
Well, in a city like New York, it kind of lasts a little bit. It lasts like maybe several years, and then it kind of fades away. In sport, it really depends on the sport too. Like in football, there was a hard-nosed coach named Bill Parcells who came into New York, coached the Giants for 7-8 years, won 2 Super Bowls with them. Then he came back for 3 years, coached the Jets, and then they did really well. But in hockey, I'm talking like the toughest sport in the world, arguably. And if anyone wants to correct me, you can say that. But I think hockey is probably the toughest sport to watch. And that hard-nosed mentality, it can last quite a bit. I think maybe 5 or 6 years, unless you don't get results. But like I said, the Rangers, if they keep having success with Laviolette and the hard-nosed mentality keeps working, I would have no problem with it whatsoever.
Well, especially in New York, and we'll get to Matt's thoughts on the second round for both the Rangers and the Knicks in a minute. But somebody help me out when it comes to regular season success versus performing in the playoffs. Why in the world is this even a thing? How do you score? And, once again, it's open to the floor. How do you go from 69 goals to 1? How do you go from 85 points to how many points did Marner get? 1, 2? And this happens all the time.
Sorry, different gear, different level. Everything's tighter. Every play is more scrutinized, right? Like you're coached a little more, right? You got to be a lot more disciplined. So when a team is used to just being freewheeling and creative, sometimes it's difficult to translate that into the playoffs. I guess so the Leafs are having that difficult. But like I said, after Game 4 in the series, they figured it out. They were a lot better. They're a lot tighter. I thought they were great defensively. Just from a court, all 6 defensemen playing together, they were playing really well. But those are the things you have to do. You have to find ways to battle through those tight checking situations. Before we came on the air, I have the Ranger game. I could see it out of the corner of my eye, and I'm watching a kid like Jake, a small guy like Jake Gensel play, and I was telling you how much I loved him as a Penguins fan. And you watch his tenacity, and he puts himself right around the net, creates space for himself, just makes those little subtle movements to create better scoring opportunities for him. And he almost just scored again. And those are things. I mean, Mitch Marner during the offseason should watch a video of Jake Gensel playing in the playoffs, because he was always a reliable performer for the Penguins when they were making the playoffs. Boo-hoo. And those are the types of things you got to make, the little sacrifices you got to do, especially when you're a guy like Mitch Marner. You got to make space for yourself out there. You're a smaller player, but and that's the thing, he's such a smart player. He's the primary figure on a power play. He's the primary figure on the penalty kill for your hockey team as well. He's a brilliant hockey player, very smart, but I just don't know like what his motivation is. Finding that next gear, there always is that next gear, and the great players manage to do it and they figure it out. He just hasn't yet. I don't want to overly criticize Matthews or Nylander as much anymore, because I think they're figuring it out. I think they've gotten better, but as a team, they're just not scoring. they're just not scoring. It's not going. It's not going in the net for them. So they're all complicit, right?
Well, and if you ask me, I mean, I think William Nylander really stepped it up. I mean, I was really impressed with his play. I didn't really appreciate how strong in terms of his puck handling, and that he did come through. And he definitely seemed to elevate his game, but in Marner's case, it was obvious that he was a liability. I mean, Dano, obviously, in the days after the end of the series and so on, a lot of attention was towards Mitch Marner. And of course, it was in a negative way. Was it justified at all?
Well, yeah.
I mean, in the sense that that a lot of the negativity was focused on Marner and not the whole team.
Marner's an easy target because Tony alluded to it, where he's obviously a very gifted player, right? There, you can't deny that. But you watch this guy play day in and day out, and there's something that really struck a chord with Leaf fans when, and we can't say for certain what happened, but when it was implied that Willie was telling him to relax, bro, because this isn't junior hockey. If that's what Willie said, and a part of me likes to believe that that's what Willie said to him, it rings true because he plays like he knows people are watching him. And I don't know how to better describe that except for he's a bit of a showman, even in the way he warms up and the way that he dances around, the way he does little things like, if he's breaking up a 2-on-1. I know I'm getting really nitpicky, but if you watch him play, the skill's undeniable, but the strength, both mental and physical, the tenacity, the attention to small detail seems to be missing from Marner. And I think the only way that I can describe it is he looks like he's playing in junior, or it looks like he's playing for TV, where he doesn't want to get dirty, he doesn't want to get in the corners or get in or mix it up or stand up to when Braden Marchand just goes after him, and those sort of things don't add up in my mind to playoff success. And then I know that you guys don't know this about me, but I'm contradicting my own inner beliefs because I'm not a Leaf fan who believes that Ty Domi should have been the captain, that Darcy Tucker was the greatest Leaf we've ever seen. I always hated that we didn't appreciate Matt Sundin when he was here. We didn't even appreciate Phil Kessel when he was here as a player and what he did for this franchise, because they're not good Canadian kids. They're not they're not rough and tough, and they're not bleeding from their face every game like Jake McCabe is, who endeared himself to the fan base this year. But so the justification of going after Marner specifically is warranted because he has a history of being a whiner, being holding out for more money. I don't know if that's his dad or not, and I know Willie did the same thing, but Marner's really rubbed people the wrong way, and we look past it because he puts up 90 points a year, and because he can do some magical things during the regular season. But when you need him most, and in a series when you were the only healthy guy, when Matthews went down with an illness and a mysterious injury, and Willie missed the first 2 games because he can't see out of his eye because he's got migraines, and Tavares isn't, and justifiably so, shouldn't be relied on as being your number one guy anymore, even though he still comes through in clutch moments. Marner's never done that, really, in all the time that he's been a Leaf in the playoffs.
But who has? That's
Willie.
the thing.
Willie's done that. Tavares has done that. Matthew Knies has already done that, and he's only been in 3 series with the Leafs, and the kid's a 21-year-old kid. Like, where is his Gary Volk moment? Where is his Nikolai Borshevsky moment? Where is Marner's playoff moment? He hasn't done it in 7 years, so I think people are just tired of it now. And then you look at this core, you're like, okay, if we had to get rid of somebody, and again, I'm not one to side with the majority often, but Matthews isn't going anywhere. he's a perennial Hart Trophy candidate. He's going to score 50 goals a year. He's going to challenge Ovechkin and Gretzky for the all-time scoring record. Should he continue on this pace? He's a great defensive forward. He's all the things that you want him to be. Willie comes through in the clutch, scoring 3 goals in the past 2 playoff games. Tavares, we know if he's not out the door by the end of next year, he's going to sign at a reduced rate and become your third-line center, or maybe he's going to move to the wing or play a different role as he ages on. So Marner's the easy one to look at and say, okay, you can get us the most return, you can save us the most money, and we can get more guys who will show up when it matters most. And we've given you 7 years, 8 years to do it now, and unfortunately you haven't done it. So whether or not they're actually able to move him, I don't know. They seem to be between a rock and a hard place where there's no move clause with his salary. So they may end up running it back with him next year, and we may need to rally around him again. But I think it's time to move on. I don't know if I said it on this show or I just said it to friends privately, but I would have made a move to trade him for Jack Eichel straight up at the time when Buffalo was trying to get rid of him. So I don't know. I'm not big on Marner right now anyway, and I know that most of Leafs Nation feels the same way.
I mean, it would have been interesting to see Matthews and Eichel. 2 American kids, and obviously the history of 1 and 2 in that draft. Before we get on to more positive news, and of course, Matty is standing by because his teams actually do something in the springtime. I did want to ask Tony. Of course, there is a new sheriff in town, in Keith Pelly, as CEO of MLSE. One move has already been made, but the president of the hockey club is Brendan Shanahan, and it's been a pretty forgettable 10 years. And beyond Shanahan, the possibility of asking Marner to waive his no trade, the same with John Tavares. How much do you think Keith Pelly has it in him to make a big splash and to really make a statement for his first full season come October?
Well, I don't think he's afraid of making tough decisions, but I don't think he's going to do a bunch of drastic things right off the hop. Now, the fact that he has a press conference booked with the president, Brendan Shanahan, tomorrow, and Brad Treliving as they're up there on the podium together tells me that I guess it's status quo in terms of the management team for the time being, unless he publicly fires both of them right there on the stage, which would be awesome. But I think Shanahan's time is up, and I think Dan, when you're talking about a more traditional setup, why not have just the GM and have that GM reporting to the new president CEO, bouncing things off of him? Do you need to have the go-between guy? Is Masai Ujiri's job going to be in jeopardy? I think there's a lot of things that are up in the air. Keith Pelly has been involved in some pretty significant decision-making situations throughout his career. I mean, he was one of the catalysts in the huge Rogers Sportsnet NHL deal, which has turned out to be a massive financial albatross for them. But at the time, it was a massive deal. So, like I said, he's got Brendan Shanahan on the podium with him tomorrow. So I don't know if his plan is to fire him. It has to be a roster shakeup somehow. If you're going to put pressure on Mitch Marner to, you call his agent and you say, listen, can you come up with a list of teams? Because we're not going to sign you at Willie Nylander's money next year. We're just not. We can't do it. Does he go a whole season knowing that, he's a walking duck? Or does he find a team that he can arrange, an extension with, someone that he wants to settle down with long term? Obviously, that's going to be in the player's hands. Now, I could see Mitch Marner, the type of guy to stick it to them, say, fuck you, I'm walking for free next year, just based on, what we see in terms of his personality. However, do you want to spend a year with a club that doesn't want you there? So it's going to be an interesting offseason. I think something will happen. John Tavares is not going anywhere. He's got a huge price tag. He's going to play out his contract. I mean, they could potentially have about $25 million in cap space next year. So I think the more significant moves might be done next year.
Yeah, it definitely is shaping up to be quite an off season, especially if changes are made. But things do look pretty grim in Toronto. But the complete opposite can be said for Gotham and New York, which is close to where Maddie is. And hey, Maddie, I mean,
Mhm.
look, the Knicks, they definitely have captured a lot of attention, especially with Jalen Brunson and the
Mhm.
trades that involve OG Ananobi.
Yep.
And it still breaks my heart. I actually got to see OG live at MSG in January,
Mhm.
and seeing the success and how he's really captured the hearts of New York is great to see, but it's still very painful to see. But
Right.
this of course is talking about hockey. Uh, I mean, hey, Ananobi is out, and I definitely love to get your thoughts on the Knicks in a few moments. But I mean, hey, 6 game winning streak. And do you have the Ranger game in the background? I mean, it is
All
a
right.
it is a big one.
So, I'm in a box with no TV, but apparently I'm part of the Colorcast Discord, like you and me, Randy.
Hmm.
And apparently I heard that the Rangers scored a shorthanded goal, so it's 1-1. Um,
Chris Kreider.
but in all
Chris Kreider,
seriousness,
yeah.
New York is a very, very eager town. But I want to bring up the two gentlemen that are with me about playoffs and what really separates people from playoff contenders to ultimately championship contenders. So in the playoffs, it really matters if you're prepared mentally, physically, and emotionally, because the playoffs they mean more than regular season games because you can win or go home in that situation. And one thing I want to bring up, and this is actually in relation to the Rangers, look at the Washington Capitals, for instance, when they played the Rangers. Alex Ovechkin had a great season, and then you go into the Rangers series round one, and I know the Capitals worked hard to get to the postseason, but they looked like they didn't belong, and Alex Ovechkin was held to just 5 shots on goal in 4 games. And it all comes down to, the coaching obviously goes into that kind of thing. But I think another part or factor of that is that how you adapt. What can you come up with that's different that makes you a threat? Like, obviously, shorthanded goals are big. The Rangers have been doing that all season long, but to bring that out in the playoffs, that's actually huge. But again, like, the playoffs are just a different animal. You got to be mentally and physically prepared for these kind of things. The Rangers have done it. They're 6-0 in the first 6 playoff games. Fingers crossed it's 7. But like, postseason in any sport, it's all about it's all about creativity and adaptability and preparedness. But New York, in that sense, I'm going to transition to basketball just for a brief second.
Please.
Basketball, Tom Thibodeau, you mentioned him before. He's a hard-nosed coach. And the way the Knicks have brought in Jalen Brunson, I mean, you got to remember, this was Luka Doncic's running mate in Dallas not too long ago. And now he's the lead man in New York because sometimes you put a guy in the spotlight and they can do unmentionable things in big spots. I mean, back to hockey for a second. Look at Carter Verhaeghe of the Florida Panthers. He can score overtime-winning goals. Matthew Tkachuk can score big goals in big moments for the Florida Panthers. David Pastrnak's consistent. It's all about your mentality in the playoffs and how you are mentally prepared for the moment. Mentality is key in any sport, in any postseason, in any situation, and that's what makes players great, and that's what separates players from good to great to legends.
But very quickly, I don't think anybody expected Jalen Brunson to have the season that he had.
No.
So, and I mean, it's New York, for God's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
How many seasons has he had now? Is he
One and a
what?
half. One and a half, but
No,
basically
sorry,
2.
like his whole career. Like
Oh, his whole career?
he's
I
what,
think like
7?
maybe several.
Yeah, absolutely. And he goes to New York, which, with due respect, it's pretty much an abyss. I mean, like, who came out of New York over the past 20, 30 years? I mean, I'm sorry, like, with due respect, I mean, who exactly is Carmelo Anthony? I mean, yeah, he is very beloved, but I mean, he never made it to a final, and I don't even know if no, they didn't make a conference final with Carmelo Anthony.
No, they didn't.
Lo and behold, Jalen Brunson is the answer. And you think about Anunoby, you think about Hartenstein, you think about Julius Randle. Of course, he's out, but I mean, and with Tom Thibodeau as the coach,
Yeah.
like it just if you were to ask me before the season started, I would say that New York was just going to be like a middle of the pack team that isn't going to make a dent in the playoffs. Now they have all
Right.
these injuries, but it could very well have been a real threat to make the conference and finals and even further. I mean, before we get back onto the Rangers, Maddie, I mean, like, what do you think of the Knicks going forward?
I think going forward, they know what they got. They got a couple gems. I know Jalen Brunson. First off, if you could play in New York, you could play anywhere in the world. Period. And Jalen Brunson has proven that in not even 2 seasons that he can do that. And the big thing is, this team is tough. I mean, if you watched Game 2 last night, OG Anunoby hurt his hamstring. He's not going to play Game 3. But Brunson came back with a bum foot and scored 29 points. He missed a quarter and still scored 29 points. That's kind of insane. But again, like, toughness is a big factor, and the Knicks have that. They don't go away. They're constantly in every game. Tom Thibodeau adapts to situations, and Rick Carlisle, who's fairly new to the playoff scene, is challenging 78 fouls, 79 fouls after controversial Game 1 and Game 2 in his mind. But it's all about like mental preparedness and toughness. And that's what this New York team brings to the table. And I think even though they're looking a little shaky right now with the injury bug, if they go into the finals, in the Eastern Conference Finals against Boston, which is what it's looking like, well done. because no one expected that. People expected Joel Embiid and the Sixers to beat him in round 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, hey, it looks like that if they have all their pieces together, that New York could be a team where players will want to do everything they can to try and land there, because we haven't really seen that in the past 20, 30 years. I mean, other than Melo, but definitely some exciting times.
By the way, there was one year that you forgot in New York, and this is actually legendary because it was so short-lived. The Linsanity era.
Oh, but I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, Jeremy Lin had this incredible run, but he didn't want to stay.
Yeah.
So I mean, that just shows. And where did he go? Was it to LA?
I believe so. I think it was the Clippers. I believe so.
Yeah, because he
wasn't it Houston? I think it was Houston.
I think you're right. I think you're right. It may have been Houston.
I think the Houston Rockets gave him a nice fat paycheck. The bag, as they call
it. And hey, Jeremy Lin, although he didn't have much of a history in Toronto, he does have a championship ring here. So, but it just goes to show once again that just because it's the bright lights of New York, and New York is obviously a world-renowned franchise, that it does seem that things are definitely turning around. Very quickly, Maddie, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the Rangers. Of course, they are the president-winning the president. What is it? President's Trophy.
President's Trophy, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say President's Cup, but that's golf. But you did mention, of course, that the winner of the President's Trophy don't usually have a strong run in the playoffs, but there still is a lot expected for the Rangers. If they don't make it to a final, would you call this season a bust?
If they don't make it to the Stanley Cup final, it's a bust. Because this has been such a magical season. The team has been so consistent and so dynamic in so many ways. And Pete Laviolette has put this team together so nicely. And I don't know what the future looks like with Laviolette as the coach. But you know that with Matt Rempe, the way we've seen him in his rookie year, we don't know how that's going to last as his career progresses because the New York fan base loves him. That might change depending on how he plays his cards in the Big Apple. But I think this Ranger team, if they don't make it to the Stanley Cup Finals or win the Stanley Cup, it's a bust. But here's what I am going to say to counter that. The final 8 teams that are left all deserve to be where they are. Because you look at the Eastern Conference, you got Carolina. Carolina was the betting favorite to win the whole thing going into this. Boston won the President's Trophy, and they had the best regular season in any NHL season ever. And yes, they lost in the first round, but that's still merit. They still have Swayman, David Pastrnak, and all these other great players in Boston. You're talking about the Florida Panthers, who are...
However, before you continue, they don't have Krejci and they don't have Bergeron.
That's right.
And I mean, the fact that they got back to, they didn't have the intense season that they had last year, but they are back in the show. It is very impressive what's happening in Boston.
Yeah, it is. But anyway, I mentioned the Panthers. They made it to the Stanley Cup Finals as a 4 seed, but this was also a former President's Team Trophy winner as well. Matthew Tkachuk, Carter Verhaeghe, all these guys. Sergei Bobrovsky turning back the clock. You know, all that in the Eastern Conference. And then you look at the West. Oh, my goodness. I mean, Jake Ottinger has got to be one of my favorite goaltenders in the NHL. That man is so consistent and so underrated. And the Dallas Stars as a whole are just really solid. And then you got the Colorado Avalanche 2 years ago. They were the Stanley Cup champions. They stole one from Dallas just a couple days ago. And then you got the Edmonton Oilers. I don't count out Connor McDavid for anything. I mean, Connor McDavid has been consistently good for a really long time, and he keeps producing numbers, and it's amazing how he just rallies that team to success. And then the Vancouver Canucks, not a lot of people expected them to make it this far, but here they are. And they stole one from Edmonton yesterday. And like I said, each team has their own reason for being here. But if the Rangers, even if they make it out of the Eastern Conference Finals, I still believe that if it's Dallas or Colorado or Edmonton or even Vancouver, it's going to be a tough one. But if they don't make it to the final, it's a failure.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, hey, when you have 114 points, you're definitely expected to do some great things, even though there is this apparent curse with the President's Trophy. Guys, let's have a quick go around with baseball. And of course, the Toronto Blue Jays are having a very challenging start to their season. Matty, some big things were expected in Toronto, especially last year, but just didn't pan out. And now there's a lot of dissension in the ranks. I mean, like with regards to the Jays, from your neck of the woods, what is the feeling with Toronto? Because over here, there's a lot of disappointed fans.
I think you said the key word, disappointment, because this is the Toronto Blue Jays team that was expected to compete for the AL East in some way, shape, or form. Like they were supposed to be in the mix with Baltimore, who's rising up the ranks, and the Yankees, who are doing better than most people expected. I mean, it's always World Series or bust with the Yankees, but they're still always in consideration no matter what. But the Blue Jays, they're not the baby Blue Jays anymore. I mean, Vlad Guerrero Jr. has a couple years under his belt. Bo Bichette has a couple years under his belt. They lost Teoscar Hernandez, which I thought was a really, really rough patch for them. They got George Springer, who's a little bit older. But you're looking at this Blue Jays team. You're talking like 17-20, 17-21. It's a little bit shocking. And they are a few games out of the wild card spot. And you look at teams like Detroit and Kansas City who are rising, and Toronto's getting past them in the pecking order. But Toronto, I mean, we're only 2/9 of the way through the season, and I think the Toronto fans should be concerned because the Blue Jays are not performing up to par with what they should be. And I know they're better than this, and I think that they will eventually get on the right track. It's just a matter of can they string together a couple of wins? Because once you string together a couple of wins, that gets you going. But the Blue Jays are not the baby Blue Jays anymore. This is a older team with a lot of expectations. They made the playoffs last year. They lost to Minnesota, but I'm shocked that they're in this position right now. I'm really, really shocked.
Well, I got to tell you that in terms of shocking, I find it absolutely incredible that Alek Manoah found his way back to the big club. I mean, of course, there was a huge spotlight on Alek Manoah when he first came up. Of course, Maddie, the incident that he had with Garrett Cole and the charisma that he had during the All-Star game. Hey, saying three punchies and just the back and forth that he had with John Smoltz during the All-Star game, and he just essentially just forgot how to pitch. And Dano, I can't believe that he's here. But one thing that I thought of is maybe this guy is just destined to be a bullpen guy. I mean, like how many closers have found themselves into the Hall of Fame after struggling as a starter? You think about Dennis Eckersley, you think about Mariano Rivera, and yeah, sure. I mean, of course, Manoah is still a kid, and that he still, I mean, physically speaking, has a lot of miles on the tank. But I mean, like in terms of like how surprised you are with Manoah being back in the big club, do you think that a run in the bullpen might be a better solution than sticking him back in a starting role position?
I don't know. I'm with you. I didn't see anything that suggested to me that he earned his way back into the big leagues. We were watching his minor league. I don't even know how you classify it. His way of trying to find his game again after completely falling off last year. We talked about him being the next Ricky Romero, where he comes out and has this magical season, but then just completely falls off. And fans and it seems like management for sure is rooting for this guy to come back. But I don't know. I don't know that I'm maybe, yeah. Throw him but don't give him any. Don't give him any hard innings. Don't let him be 8th or 9th inning. 4, 5, 6 innings. Give him an inning here or there. Try to make his matchups as favorable as possible. But like, it's so hard to trust this guy out there in any shape, whether he's starting or potentially in the bullpen. So I don't know. I don't know what the long-term plan is for him or what the hope is for him to become again. But it's not working out yet.
Tony, do you think John Schneider finishes the season? I mean, just let's call it what it is. Something has to be done. And I don't know if you could blame Schneider for the lack of, whether it's effort or just simply results for a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, here's a guy who's, flirting with a triple crown a couple years ago. And now he just seems to be just another guy. He's good. Maybe he might make an all-star game, but we definitely expected a lot more. And, when we were talking in the beginning about coaches not bringing it when it comes to the playoffs and so on, I mean, Schneider's a guy who just seems to skid his wheels, especially at the start of the season. I mean, do you think that he's going to figure something out?
I doubt it. I think he might not finish the season. I think there's a good chance because it's going to be a desperate move, right? And hopefully Ross Atkins follows him, and then hopefully Mark Shapiro follows him after that, because it's been It's actually a waste of a really good starting rotation. What's happening with the batting order there for the Blue Jays? And again, you can kind of compare this to the Leafs. I mean, these are heavily hyped players when you think of Vlad, when you think of Bo, who've been complete letdowns over the last few years, and especially when the going gets tough come playoff time. They've had some devastating playoff losses the last couple of years, right? The Seattle loss where they blew the 8-0 lead, and then
Mhm.
yanking Jose Barrios while he was pitching an absolute gem last year was unforgivable. Now, is that John
That that
Schneider,
that's what
or
I think
is
that.
that John Schneider, or is that the mandate from Shatkins up there who want to do the analytics bullshit and not just trust the gut and let the guy pitch his fucking brains out until his arm falls off? You know, these these are the things that I don't understand about baseball sometimes. And I'm a throwback guy, and we've talked about this before. It's like let the guy pitch. I watched Jack Morris pitch 10 fucking innings when he was with the Minnesota Twins back in 1988, 89. I want to say. I forgot the year of the season.
91,
Oh,
91,
91, 91. And the next year he
91.
was a Blue Jay doing the same shit. And I don't know. But look, they get paid to be smarter than me. So what do I know, right? But
But you
I
know
could
what,
see a scenario. Sorry, go ahead.
Tony, I'm so sorry, but you know what?
That's
I
okay.
couldn't agree more with you because I am, I really do believe in sports science because I was on a roundtable and we were talking about Bobby Orr. And look, how many years did Bobby Orr play? And he had a shortened career because of bad knees. And I'm wondering if he didn't play, if he did load management like Kawhi Leonard, like how many more years could we have gotten out of Bobby Orr? I mean, we're taking a look at goaltenders now in the playoffs. I mean, why run a goaltender out for 16 straight games? Get your backup in there for, say, game two. And I really do think that that's a good idea because, yeah, look, if you can't win one game in, say, the first or second round, how are you going to win the Stanley Cup final? I mean, I think there is. Sorry, Tony, please.
No, I see your point, and I could see, during the regular season where you could pick your spots throughout the regular season to preserve a guy. I get it, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Jays were down 1-0 in that series going into that game that they
Yep,
blew.
Minnesota,
The
Minnesota
Barrios, no, the Barrios game against Minnesota. Yes. So
against
you're down
Minnesota.
1-0. Right. So you're down 1-0 in the series. It's a wild card series, so it's best 2 out of 3, is it not?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So much I watch baseball now. So it's a best 2 out of 3, best 2 out of 3 series. You need that win. There is no tomorrow. You need that win. Sports science, you take, flush it down the toilet, and leave it there in that scenario. That's my point. And analytics, you can just, you know, take a bullet to it at that point. This guy's pitching his ass off. Keep him in there and let it ride.
I think the difference that I have with what you said is that I think the other sports have it right, but I think baseball has it completely wrong. Because especially when it comes to the playoffs, I mean, who remembers Blake Snell in the World Series? And Maddie, I'm sure you want to chime in on this one. I mean, Blake Snell was pitching 4 innings of perfect baseball or no hit baseball in the World Series, and it was Game 7. And Joe Madden decides to pull Blake Snell, and Tampa lost the game. They lost the World Series. But what? I mean, we did see the Hallidays, the Greg Maddoxes, the Randy Johnsons. Tony, you mentioned Jack Morris, and they went 9 innings. And these guys are getting Tommy John surgery at the snap of a finger. I don't get it. I mean, is it simply, and Maddie, I'd love to get your thoughts on this one with regards to, is it because these guys are just spending way too much time in the gym? That these guys are only considering about throwing gas and that, we're not seeing the curveball specialists like we did with a Maddox and pitchers of yesterday.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the whole analytics part of it. We did a heavy related baseball show way back. And one thing that we talked about was analytics and how it's kind of had its perks with the game, but it also has its many, many, many problems. But Aaron Boone, classic example. Although he's gotten better with that recently. But the Blake Snell thing, yeah, it was a move that made no sense. 4 innings of baseball, you need that game to win the World Series. It was during COVID. It was 2020. It was against the Dodgers. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I think when you ask the question about pitching and the gym and everything, I think we're starting to see more focus on finesse with these pitchers more than anything, just to show how much pitching has changed and how flashy it is now. Because pitchers never really got the attention that they deserved in the past. It really has been the hitters. But
I don't know about that. I mean, I think with regards to with New York, New York did have Roger Clemens for a minute, and you think about Roger Clemens back when he was in Boston. I mean, with Randy Johnson when he was in Seattle, of course, Arizona. You think about Kurt Schilling. I think that there was quite a bit of allure for pitchers. I mean, hey, they're the only ones that really sweat out there, especially.
True. That's true. But I feel like the game has gotten to the point now where we focus on having an arsenal of pitches, having a variety of pitches, how to make, a hitter, how to confuse a hitter, how to make a hitter look silly. And I feel like that's why we see these pitchers stress their arms out or stress out their elbows or their forearms or their shoulders or anything that relates to throwing a baseball, because they want to make sure that they get the best out of themselves when facing a hitter and helping their team win games. And that's ultimately the reason why we're seeing pitchers like this, being used in a weird way because of matchup situations, because of, what you're going to get and your chances of winning a certain matchup.
Well, I mean, hey, for a Yankee fan, which I believe you are.
Yes.
I mean, Garrett Cole. Is there really a timeline for when he's expected to return? Because of course, he obviously is one of the top pitchers in baseball, and he's has yet to throw a pitch. And I'm putting money on the fact that we're not going to see him at least this year. I mean, look at Shohei Ohtani. Every time I hear a pitcher with an arm injury, I'm not expecting him back for months.
Yeah. So Garrett Cole, his timeline, they're trying to rush him back for July. That's what at least that's what I'm hearing. And the reason why is because apparently Garrett Cole saw a doctor who gave him some magical type of surgery that will help him recover faster. And that's the reason why we're hearing a report. But I agree with you in a sense. Like when Carlos Rodon came to New York last year and they rushed him back because after an arm injury, I immediately said this is not going to work right away. And look what happened to Carlos Rodon in year one. It wasn't pretty. So I agree with you in a sense that pitchers with an arm injury, like Ohtani, like he's now exclusively batting this year, although he will be back to pitching next year. They shouldn't be rushed back if the injury is severe to the point where you need surgery or Tommy John. But in the case of Garrett Cole, everyone is hearing about the surgery that he's getting, it'll supposedly make him feel superhuman.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting to see for sure. I mean, I just think that the big thinkers for all of these teams in Major League Baseball have to get some advice of pitching coaches 30, 40 years ago if they're still, alive. But because we didn't see the kind of devastating injuries that we're seeing now. And, it's a real shame because guys like Cole, guys especially like Ohtani, that we're not able to see them do their thing. It's It's really hurting the game for sure.
Big time.
Over to the NBA, and hey, it was a pretty difficult year for the Toronto Raptors, and they were really not in any sort of race at all during the season. Tony, of course, an employee of Scotiabank Arena, and hey, he's seen some great things because of the Raptors, but it certainly didn't come this year, unless Tony was working when OG and Pascal and Fred VanVleet came back, which is really, really difficult for a guy like me, a big Raptors fan. But I mean, Tony, we are obviously in the heart of the NBA playoffs. And I mean, is there any interest at all on your end, especially with the Raptors not being in it? I mean, hey, there are some new teams that are making a run. Take a look at Minnesota. Take a look at, hey, even New York. Are you interested at all?
You know what? Mildly, a bit more than I thought I would be. First of all, obviously, big smile on my face, the fact that LeBron is out. But you know what? The obviously, as a Canadian, you're cheering on Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and wishing the best for him first and foremost. You put your, and then you got Denver, of course, and Jamal Murray, but he's already won one, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander kind of brought this team out of nowhere to being. They were the number one seed in the West, I believe, right? By percentage points.
Yeah.
And then this Minnesota Timberwolves team, man, they've just like drawn me in. I've been watching highlights and I actually caught a couple of games, and like I knew who Anthony Edwards was. However, I hadn't been paying attention. As basketball is probably the lowest of the sports I take interest in at the moment. But man, they're drawing me in big time. What a story they are. They're killed. They're 6-0. They're destroying some very good basketball teams right now.
And I mean, Anthony Edwards, he definitely has this trajectory to be the potential
Michael Jordan's son.
Yeah, I mean, like the guy is just. I mean, the fact that he's called Ant-Man. I mean, I think they could do something a little different with the nickname. I mean, Ant, when you have that kind of explosive skill and talent, but he definitely seems to have that kind of pedigree. And I mean, hey, it is really cool to see new teams get in the spotlight. I mean, Minnesota, they've been just a forgettable franchise for years. I think they've only won one playoff series, and now they are a real contender to be an NBA threat, like a champion threat. Tony did bring up Jamal Murray, and Jamal Murray's definitely had a brain cramp a couple days ago, throwing a heating pack and a towel at a referee. Dano, he was fined $100,000. I mean, you think the the fine was justified and that he didn't deserve a suspension?
I don't think he deserved a suspension. I'd have to go through the history of people throwing stuff on the court to determine if $100,000 is too much or not. It feels like it's too much. I don't know that he was even necessarily aiming for the ref. It just looked like he was just throwing it out of frustration. But if Bobby McKnight can coach this team from throwing chairs, and Jason Kidd can do the stuff with the hit me in the water cup, they can do maybe not as as egregious or maybe even as done in anger, but I think it's fine. I think $100,000 is too much, and I think we need to see Jamal Murray on the court, not up in the press box, because he lost his mind temporarily.
But Dano, I mean, I'm sorry. Throwing things on the court is ridiculous. I'm let's call it what it is. I'm a pretty big homer. I mean, I love seeing Jamal Murray, doing the great things that he's doing. Shea, Tony, of course, mentioned the overwhelming success. He finished second in MVP voting. And just run down the list of Canadians doing well in sports other than hockey. I really hoped that the NBA was going to suspend Jamal Murray. If you remember, I think it was earlier this season, Giannis, who I'm a big fan of, he was snapping a towel at a referee. How come he didn't get suspended for that? There is no chance that the first or second guy off of a bench, or even the starting center who may not get as much all-star recognition, there is no chance that guy is going to get suspended. Is not going to get. I mean, the guy is going to get suspended, but because it's Jamal Murray, because he's an NBA champion. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's an all-star yet, but he will be. He's one of those marquee guys. NBA said, "Nah, just fine. We'll just donate $100,000 and we'll call it a day." That's I think that's completely ridiculous.
Go ahead, Maddie. I see you want to jump in.
Yeah.
What's contradicting about that? Patrick Beverley threw a basketball on fans while he was on the bench, and he got a 4-game suspension for next year. So I think this is just a case of a league protecting their stars and making sure that they play games that actually matter, especially in the postseason. And I'm not saying that it didn't matter. I mean, the Bucks were eliminated when Patrick Beverley threw the basketball and was out of frustration. But again, this is the NBA saying, you know what? This was wrong, but because we like you and you're a big star, we're going to give you a slap on the wrist. And that's it.
But I think that's a huge problem with the league. I mean, if you ask me, stars don't get they get the preferential treatment, and if you're a middle of the pack guy, you're going to get dinged for a foul. I mean, the tilt is just mind-blowing to me, and I have no idea. And I'm not being facetious. I don't know why the league or any league does this. I mean, look, okay, so you have the LeBrons and you have the Steph Currys and I really don't believe that any league benefits by having the same guys as captain of the All-Star game, going to the conference and championship series. I think that any a league would benefit a hell of a lot more if all of their teams have an equal shot. Now, look, maybe you're going to get more viewership if a team like the New York Knicks make the NBA Finals. I get it. Maybe the same with the Lakers. Maybe the same with the Yankees. New England Patriots, perhaps. But you are running a league with 30-plus teams. Why is it that so many teams, like a few teams, just get all the breaks? I don't get it.
Randy, whose jersey are you wearing right now?
Barcelona, sure.
How many good teams are in that Spanish soccer league?
Okay,
3?
but is that a part of? Is that because of? I think that's a different dynamic. You're talking about payroll and revenue and how much resources certain teams have, and I think soccer in Europe is I mean, I get it. Like soccer in Europe, I mean, the amount of money that said team, Barcelona's and Liverpool's and whoever, Juventus. I don't know how fans can support domestic soccer in Europe. Dano, please enlighten me. And Tony, I know that you're a big soccer guy as well. But
to cross into soccer, but generally speaking, and I have this argument all the time, I am a fan of super teams. I am a fan of teams making villains out of themselves, like the Yankees, like the Leafs, like LeBron. People want somebody to hate, and those teams doing well are good for the league. So I disagree with you that saying that to see the same teams over and over and over again isn't good for the sport. I think it is. I think generally, we look at it as more of a regional thing where we want to see, some people want to see smaller teams thrive because, we, in baseball, for example, we support a smaller market team in that sense. I know that we have one of the bigger payrolls, but we're still looked at as a small market team in the MLB. We're not the Yankees. We're not the Cubs. We're not the Dodgers. We're the small Canadian team. So people in LA don't want to see the Blue Jays win. They don't care. I don't care to see the Pittsburgh Pirates be a good team. I don't care to see even Minnesota do well. It doesn't do anything for me. I want Miami in the NBA. I want the Lakers. I want New York. I want those big teams doing well all the time because I think it draws attention on a national and international level. I think it's easier for the league to sell that way. And it's also, it makes you, it gets the blood boiling. We're product, the three of us, Maddie. I don't know if you did radio broadcast school as well, but we had entire lessons on how to get the phone to ring. And you do that by pushing people's buttons, by getting people to respond in an emotional way. And seeing a different team win every year doesn't make me emotional. It makes me emotional to see that the same fucking team, that the Patriots, are in the fucking playoffs in the Super Bowl for the 12th time in a goddamn row, right? And fuck Tom Brady and fuck Bill Belichick. That's what drives ticket sales. That's what people want to see. That's why the Leafs and the Bruins was the most watched Game 7 of our first round, and I don't know how long, because people love to see the same teams kill each other, and they love to see, in hockey maybe specifically, a team like the Leafs lose again the way that they lost. So if it was Bruins and Columbus, here we go picking on Columbus for the second time in this show, I don't know that millions of people would have watched. So I think it's good that the top teams are always in. I think it drives attention on a much more macro level, which is always good for the game, for any sport trying to grow.
But Daniel, explain domestic soccer in Europe then. I mean, how many years did Juventus win Serie A?
Yeah, 10 times in a row. But that's the same thing. So for the top 7 or 8 teams, for the English teams, Liverpool and Chelsea and Man City and Man U, and the Italian teams, Roma, Juventus. For the Spanish teams, Barcelona and Real. And the German teams, the top in their club, to want to break off and make a super league. You understand why? Because they can't sell tickets when it's West Brom playing Man U, or when it's Sampdoria playing Juventus. They want Juventus versus Roma all the time. They want Inter versus Milan all the time, because that's what people want to see. And I know that living in a small town, living in Wrexham, and living in Bari,
Fulham. I was in London during the summer and went to a Fulham match. And, obviously, Craven Cottage is smaller than Stamford Bridge, but, those Fulham fans it was a packed house.
Yeah, for sure. But, are you going to get a kid from Bradford or a kid from Calgary to put on a Fulham jersey? I don't think so. Right? Until they can buy their way to the top, like the top clubs have right now. And Man City's a good example of that, where they weren't an elite team up until, a decade ago, 15 years ago, when they really started putting some money behind getting Fulham and getting Holland and getting, Kyle Walker and getting all these names and buying their way to the top of that league. And then eventually to the top of international football globally. They won everything last year. And now, ask any kid who their favorite player is. If it's not Messi because he just won a World Cup and he's still doing Messi things, Holland is top 5. And that's what's going to keep drawing more eyes, and that's what's going to drive more revenue, and that's what's going to, make me tune in as a non-Man City fan, to use just to stay on the soccer for a second, when they make it to the finals again next year, or when they're competitive, to watch them just to see them lose. But I want them there. It's not that I don't want them there. But soccer is a whole different thing. So I get it. I get that big clubs are killing small grassroots soccer, and I'm not a supporter of that. But if you look at it as a business, which sports is, you can understand why the Juventus family or why Barcelona would want to create a super league where they don't have to bother playing, where the stadium that has 10,000 fans and doesn't draw national attention on the television. They want to be playing the rivals, and they want to be playing teams that people want to watch win or lose.
I mean, what I'm about to say is pure assumption, but obviously, for how many years in a row? I guess it was what, 4? You saw Cleveland versus Golden State in the NBA Finals. Now, of course, Cleveland had a national scope because of LeBron. Golden State had a national scope because of Steph. But then the Raptors come in, and everybody is hoping for the Toronto Raptors, including fans in the United States, to cheer for and hope that the Raptors were going to win in 2019.
But why, Randy? Pause right there. Did they want the Raptors to win, or did they want Golden State to lose?
You know what? Fair enough. Fair enough. What my point was is that, so, you have this run of, say, the Clevelands and the Golden States. They're doing their thing, and whatever the ratings were, I'd love to see what the ratings were from the 2000, and I guess it would be 15 NBA Finals, the first finals run with Cleveland and Golden State versus the 18 finals, because I'm wondering what those TV ratings were. To make a long point short, like, we saw a huge explosion of revenue, interest with regards to Toronto and basketball. I mean, the entire country was so enamored with it. I could definitely see that happening for if the New York Knicks make the NBA Finals, only because it's been so long. But I think if it was even Oklahoma City, especially with the nucleus that they have, or if it was Minnesota, if you have different teams that are getting to the big dance, you're going to generate more interest. Like, take a look at a local community. I mean, I can only imagine how much more apparel sales, especially for Toronto, skyrocketed because they won the championship. I just see that kind of cycle. I see, with regards to, I don't know, take the Detroit Lions, for example. Like, let's say that they actually make it to a Super Bowl. Cleveland Browns, you know, within those communities. I mean, football may be a little different because apparel sales are so crazy as it is, especially within each NFL market. But I don't know. I mean, Tony, you've been kind of silent on this one. Are you more of a super team kind of guy, or is there some validity to what I'm saying?
I think you're all right. I think there's, and I don't mean to sit on the fence. I think there's an appeal either way. I think big markets are important, but the structure of how it's set up in Europe is so different than how it's set up here, right? Where it's designed for multiple teams to have a chance at a championship every year. I think over here, especially basketball, stars sell. So it doesn't matter if it's a small market team, as we saw with Cleveland and Golden State. You had stars there that you feel like watching, that you're up to watching, just like Anthony Edwards right now. The whole world's ready to watch this kid play. They don't give a shit that he plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They just want to watch him play. I also think people are ready to move on now from the old guard in the NBA, especially LeBron. Um, you can see it in the numbers now. I mean, there are numbers declining in terms of playoff um, viewership for the NBA. So that kind of tells me, and obviously I can't get into the minds of basketball fans and how they consume these games, but it kind of tells me that they're ready to move on from the old guard and they're sick of watching it. So I think this stuff goes cyclical. I'm okay with dynasties too, Dan. Like I think it's amazing watching what the Patriots accomplished and the Kansas City Chiefs right now. I respect the hell of them. I mean, they take my Buffalo Bills out every year, but I still respect the hell out of what they're doing. Um, but I think these things are cyclical, and it's about watching stars over here, especially with basketball. You've got to, it's a star-driven league, and we kind of lost that a bit over the last few years because there was so much emphasis on one or two guys, and that's all these pundits talk about. I mean, the Lakers have been gone for 3 weeks now, but you could put it on First Take and listen to those annoying bastards just yap away about. Seriously, you just hear them yap away about who the GOAT is between LeBron and you know it's annoying, right? And it's showing in the viewership as well. And people are ready to watch something new. Even Nikola Jokic winning the MVP for the third time in 4 years. It's such a polarizing subject for these guys. They hate it so much because why? He's from Europe and he's white and he's gangly looking and he doesn't look like a physical specimen, but you know, he enjoys watching horse racing in the off season, doesn't care to put himself on Instagram and be a star or anything. This just plays the game and goes back home to his country and races a bunch of horses. So I think the way we
And
consume sports has changed a bit. And I think we're getting sick of listening to these guys tell us how we should follow the game as well.
hmm. Maddie, did you
I
have any? Sorry, Tony.
no, I don't know. It's just my take. I don't know if I'm way
Yeah.
off, but
Well, I don't know. Maddie, I guess regarding this topic, final comment is to you. It looked like you had an additional thought.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think Rick Carlisle, I think of the Pacers coach, said something that I think really struck a chord with me. He said to a referee, and I think this is what got him ejected in Game 2 of the next Pacers series. He said, "You don't want to give small market teams a chance." And you mentioned small market teams. Look at the March Madness tournament. That's the perfect example of rooting for lower seeds, small market teams, the teams from lower conferences that you really don't get to see too much coverage of. Try to make it to the end and win championships or go on a deep playoff run. Like the March Madness tournament is the perfect example of that. I mean, for example, 2 years ago, there was a team called the St. Peter's Peacocks who were from my neck of the woods in New Jersey, Jersey City, New Jersey, that made it all the way to the Elite Eight as a 15th seed. And New Jersey basketball does not get a lot of coverage these days. So it was very, very fulfilling for me as a Jersey resident to see a team from my state being represented on a big platform like the NCAA tournament. And I think in professional sports, seeing a small market team like the Detroit Lions or the Cleveland Browns or heck, even the Minnesota Timberwolves, like Minnesota doesn't really get too much success anyway. So when we see small or low success cities have this kind of success, it's great because it's like we're getting exposure to other realms of the country or other cities that we may not know about and other communities that we may not know about. And I think that's what's the most fulfilling about seeing small market teams. I mean, seeing big powerhouse markets go crazy is good because it's good for ratings, but it's not as fulfilling as seeing small market teams go at it and try to win.
Yeah. Hey, look, valid points all around, really. And Dano, I completely get what you're saying with regards to the allure of dynasties and all that. But I don't know. I especially with the NBA, I just think that just I think that the tilt is obvious, and I think that more than anything is what I have a problem with. But hey, who am I to say what the NBA should and shouldn't do? Guys, I did want to bring up very quickly the matter that took place in Indianapolis and with regards to this reporter from the Indianapolis Star and Caitlin Clark. And obviously, Caitlin Clark is doing things that nobody has been able to do and get a lot of attention towards women's basketball. Of course, her run in college. She was drafted and is currently in the preseason with Indiana and is expected to do some really great things. And as we all know, that there was an incident with regards to a reporter saying some sort of comment with regard, and that had a whether it was a sexual undertone, a romantic undertone, and so on. You know, I can appreciate that this may be a sensitive topic. Uh, you know, Tony, we've had one thing I really, really do enjoy, truthfully, is the different discussion, different points of view that we have. And the reporter who is very highly regarded in Indianapolis has been banned to going to Indiana Fever games. And wanted to get your thoughts to start things off with regards to this. I mean, are you like just your general thoughts on what transpired?
Well, this is like it's creepy. It was a little creepy the way he, asked the question. It was weird. I think suspending him is very excessive because when you're going to start suspending reporters for saying things that might upset people, I just think you're chartering into a bad precedent, right?
So
Like
just before you continue,
you
so he was suspended for 2 weeks from the
two weeks.
from the paper, but then he was banned from the going to Fever games. So yeah, just
Yes.
wanted to in terms of what you were talking about, yeah, just wanted to
Okay.
clarify. Yeah.
Okay. But
So please, I'm sorry,
I
continue.
see, I always like to look at these things deeper, and as somebody who took broadcasting, who had a passion for journalism and all that sport, it's a microcosm on how some of these members of the media cover sports these days. They want to be friends with athletes. They don't want to be objective. And so when you have a situation like that where this reporter is sitting there and trying to be buddy buddy with Caitlin Clark instead of doing his job and just asking some basic questions, this is the problem. And that's why you get less objectivity in the media. People who cover the Leafs, for instance, don't do it the way they used to, with some serious criticisms and asking some tough questions. I think Steve Simmons might be the only one left in this city who does any of that. Um, so I think, like I said, this is a microcosm of how the media covers sports these days. They want to be friends with these athletes. They want to be in the in crowd, and so you get situations like this. But I think this could have been handled with a conversation between the Fever and reporter, and maybe get together with Kate and Clark and say, I was just trying to have some fun because I think he was doing this the love sign to her, right? It's what she does to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
her family during the games, and just a little creepy. It was definitely weird and creepy, but like I said, you're setting a bad precedence when you start to suspend people from doing their jobs because you might have, hurt, made someone upset. They're words. They're words. They're not actions. They're words. And we need to tread carefully with that stuff.
No, absolutely. I think that, and the reporter's name is Greg Doyle, that there was no way he was thinking about saying a comment like that 10 seconds before he said it. And it was an off the cuff comment that, whether he was trying to be humorous or something, I just think it was one of those things where he didn't think. We can all agree to the fact that it was creepy. And there definitely, I think, should have been a discipline towards the place that he's employed. 2 weeks. I am not disappointed in that. There is something about being banned from fever games that I have a problem with. And you know, I do like to think of myself as somebody who, appreciates the role of women in sports, and like the evolution of, women's basketball, and of course the PWHL. I mean, I think it's just really terrific. Some of the practices that they're doing, of course, this playoff format, which you're going to talk about in shortly. I mean, I think that this was an opportunity that, whether it was the Fever or the WNBA, could have really capitalized on, and saying that it was an inappropriate comment that he didn't really mean. And I don't know if I'm alone on this one, but I think that if the WNBA or the Fever, whoever, if they said, we give you a pass, just don't do it again. I mean, I think that that would just been so much more of a benefit to the league in this pursuit of gaining more sports relevancy in North America. Any thoughts? Tony, Maddie, please, yeah, jump in.
Yeah, I remember hearing about the story. I looked into it, and my first reaction was this guy, Greg Doyle, is a little bit shady, just a little bit. Um, I mean, I get it. You want to be buddy buddy with Caitlin Clark, and you want to get along with her. I get it, but like, there's a sense of where's the professionalism towards your job. That's my biggest concern. As someone who covered college sports when I was at Rutgers University, Jersey represent, I always did my job when I interviewed an athlete or a football player or a gymnast or a wrestler. I always kept it professional. I didn't try to be buddy buddy because I felt like when you try to be buddy buddy with an athlete, you let yourself go a little bit, and maybe you say things that you probably shouldn't say when you're working for a professional station or a network or a broadcast station. So that's my biggest take here is like, if you're gonna do something, you gotta be professional, and that's what I think Greg missed here. Now, as far as the suspension, his punishment, it's appropriate in a sense because he did make fun of Caitlin. He did poke a little joyful mark at Caitlin Clark's trademark. That's what Caitlin Clark always does. She does the heart for her family.
I mean, respectfully, before you continue, people of your vintage, Maddie, I mean, Gen Z or millennial, whatever you are,
Yeah.
I mean, we see this stuff all the time. I mean,
Yeah. No, we see it all the time. But that's what apparently she does every home game to her family. But again, it's just like you gotta remember and realize in your head what your objective is, what you're there to do, and what story you're gonna try and write. And fun fact, as someone who went to Rutgers and Caitlin Clark was part of the Big Ten, I got to see Caitlin Clark. Before she became a star. So I know who she is. I've seen her before, and I know Caitlin. Like, she blushed at that comment, the Greg Doyle comment. And when you get a star to blush on a press conference, a public press conference, that's not really your objective to do. And also, Caitlin Clark has a boyfriend, so that's also another little thing that you're like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this. But the suspension, I have no problem with whatsoever.
I mean, I know that obviously there was a different time, 20, 30 years ago. Like, I remember watching, I think it was a 30 for 30 on the tennis match, Battle of the Sexes. And Billie Jean King brought up the fact that Howard Cosell, who called the tennis match, always talked about Billie Jean King's appearance other than instead of her skill. And I remember an instance where Eugenie Bouchard, Canadian tennis player, obviously had a great start to her career and just fell off. She was asked at the Australian Open which celebrity she would go on a date with, and she was asked by a female reporter. Now, this was, say, 8 years ago, and I think that we have evolved where we don't need to ask female athletes, especially, those kind of questions that sports fans like me, and I think I could say speak for Tony and Dan, and as well as you, Matt. I don't care who Eugenie Bouchard thinks is cute, let alone Caitlin Clark or enter said athlete here. I think that we could all recognize that this was a comment that was just not thought of. And I think, and Dano, if you'd love to comment on this, I think the suspension at the paper was justified. I think banning him from Fever games was too much.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know much about this gentleman's history. I don't know if he has a history of this stuff. When I saw it, it felt like, and I can empathize with this. It just came out as socially awkward. It came out as somebody who was just trying to have a moment with Caitlin Clark, was trying to, just be cutesy in a way. Like not, I don't think it was malicious. I don't think he meant to insult or even make her feel uncomfortable. He just said, you flash me the love sign, and and we can be friends as well. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was just, to your point. I don't know that he put a lot of thought into it. I don't know that this was anything outside of just a full pop. So I don't know that suspension or anything is warranted, unless this guy has a history, which I'm not aware of. But if this is an isolated incident, I think just a reminder to Maddie's point. Just you're here to do a job, and your job is to not be friends with this person. So just stick to that. We'll give you a week off with pay to just think about what you've done. Maybe write a letter of apology or something like that, just to acknowledge that maybe an ethical line was crossed, but it seemed innocent enough to me.
Yeah. I mean, Maddie, well, you probably have an idea that I'm quite a jersey collector. Dan and Tony have firsthand experience in that. And if there's anything I could do to get an Indiana Fever jersey, I'd be all about it, because, I mean, if you're putting a wager down on what's going to be the most popular jersey in basketball, let alone in all of sports, I mean, it's definitely going to be a Caitlin Clark jersey, no doubt about it. But guys, we're going to flip over to our rapid fire segment. And Maddie, I'm not sure if you've been a part of a rapid fire segment. I can't remember what we did. I know that you had joined Dan and myself and Neil Katari once upon a time, and I think we had a different format. But basically, this rapid fire segment is called Straight Facts or Bro Relax. And how this is going to work, Maddie, is that I'm going to give you a statement, and you are either going to agree by saying straight facts, you're going to tell me why, or you're going to disagree and by saying bro relax, and you're going to tell me why. So Dano, we're seeing quite a following with the PWHL. This first season has, in all intents and purposes, been an absolute success, and this women's hockey league has a very, very intriguing format for their playoffs, as the team with home ice advantage picks their opponent. And I think that this would be absolute money for the NHL. And I am thinking that in less than 5 years, we're going to see the NHL have their first 4-seeded teams pick their opponent for the first and second round of the playoffs. Straight facts or bro relax?
Bro, relax. There's no way that's happening in the NHL. I think it's a great idea. And truthfully, any alteration that the NHL makes to their playoff format, I'm in favor for, but this is not going to happen.
But you know what? The NHL has tinkered with, you have the wild card, and you had 1 versus 8, and then you had, of course, in the 80s and early 90s, you had divisional play where, the first seeded team in the Smythe division played the 4th seeded team. It's just simply a different change. I mean, take a look at Toronto versus Florida last year. Now, I don't know if this is comparable, but I mean, those Toronto fans were chanting, "We want Florida." And then Florida, of course, dummied them. And let's say that home ice, that team who gets to pick, the fans get charged up. And I mean, I think it's an absolute slam dunk if basketball and hockey do it.
Yeah, I like the idea. I can't see it working out. I don't know Gary Bettman all that well, but he's put a strong emphasis on even making sure that teams don't travel as far as any further than they need to, which is why I think they went the way that they went with the divisional rivals, building these rivalries and making sure that the same teams are playing each other all the time intentionally. So I don't know. Yeah, I can't see it happening with this ownership group. Maybe if Bettman resigns or retires and leaves somebody else in charge, maybe if Dubas becomes commissioner, he might do something radical like that. But yeah, generally, I would say, bro, relax.
And you know what? I'm not surprised, and you know what? There's a part of me that definitely agrees with you, but you have to admit that there was quite a charge with the Leafs and the Panthers, especially when all us Leaf fans were begging for Florida in that second round last year. But Tony, of course, it is very well documented that you are not so much the president of the LeBron James fan club, but it has been very, very clear that LeBron James has this desire to play with his son, Bronny. He has declared for the NBA draft, and that LeBron James wants to play at least one season with his son. If Bronny James does not find a consistent home in the NBA and plays in Europe, I still believe that LeBron will follow and fulfill that quote unquote dream to play with Bronny. So let's say it was Maccabi Tel Aviv. Let's say it was the basketball version of Real Madrid. LeBron James playing with Bronny as a teammate, even if it's in Europe. Straight facts or bro, relax?
Can I go with bro, kill myself instead?
you always want to instead of going with
Listen,
one of the two, you always have a spin to it. I love it.
you know what? Listen, the idea of LeBron James going away to Europe makes me very happy. It would make me smile. So if that's what it means, absolutely go for it. But in all seriousness, I've always given LeBron James credit for seemingly being a very good father. It just on the surface, so from my vantage point, he's really put Bronny in a tough situation here. Like, am I crazy? Is this guy anywhere capable of being an NBA player? I mean, to be a one and done guy, his numbers at USC were just absolute garbage. And so if he does end up in the NBA, that's the epitome of privilege. Absolutely. If a team's willing to give him a chance, it's because of his father. So I mean, if he's going to put his son through that to satisfy some part of his ego that he wants accomplished, and seems like it's just attention again for LeBron. But then it's hard to criticize a guy who's supportive of his son and this and that. But am I crazy? Like, he's not good enough to be an NBA player.
Well, you know what? I am not overly versed in what Bronny did at USC. Maddie, I'm guessing if there was one person who is close to Division One ball and maybe has an idea of what Bronny did at USC. I mean, does he have the chops to make it in the association?
There's a bigger chance of me playing ball in college than Bronny James going to the NBA. And the reason why I say this is because the points were not there. He barely scored double-digit points a game. Blocks and assists were okay. But you also got to remember, this is a guy who also had a medical problem when he was at USC. So that's another issue where it's like, can this kid actually stay on the court and be healthy? Because injuring yourself is one thing, but having a seizure is a big, big problem. And that's what Bronny James went through. I'm not saying this to be offensive. I'm saying this because it's true. Bronny James does not have the conditioning to be an NBA athlete. He's not exactly the scoring type that the NBA looks for in all their athletes. And if he's there strictly for PR, I think look at Lonzo Ball, for instance. Lonzo Ball is the big example of what Bronny James is. A guy who was overhyped, a guy whose father branched out to so many people, started his own company just for the sake of his son, to make it to the NBA, and then when Lonzo Ball got to the NBA, he didn't do good. And that's what's going to happen with Bronny. I just don't have that feeling that he's going to succeed. And if he does go to the NBA, the Lakers are going to focus more so on keeping a player satisfied than long-term success. That's just my opinion on this.
Well, and you know what? You couldn't. I don't think you could be any more correct. It is funny because it did seem that Lonzo was starting to get somewhere with Chicago, and now he's just crippled with these devastating injuries. Who knows if we're ever going to see him again? But I had no idea. And very quickly, like it is interesting that Lonzo got chirped as much as he did, but LaMelo seems to be one of those guys that fans are really keen on. I had no idea Bronny James had these kind of stat lines. I mean, under 5 points a game, under 3 rebounds. He is close to 1 steal, but these numbers are absolutely pathetic. I mean, I cannot believe that he's going to declare for the draft. He already did. Like, who in their right mind would take him even mid to high second round? I mean, it's just absolute lunacy. Anyway, all right. So help me God if Toronto drafts Bronny James. I'm not going to be. I'm not going to be happy at all. Very quickly and finally, I mean, hey, Maddie, we've been talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves to various degrees, and they're just on another planet right now, and we have never seen it from the Timberwolves. And once upon a time, teams like the Golden State Warriors weren't as dominant as they once were, and as they were, in the 2010s. And I mean, the same could be said for the New England Patriots. And obviously, Minnesota has not accomplished a heck of a lot yet, but they definitely seem to have a foundation.
Yep.
The NBA's new IT team. It seems that there isn't a team right now that captured the attention like Golden State, Cleveland, Miami with LeBron there. Could the NBA's new IT team be the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Straight facts. And here's why. Anthony Edwards has proven that he could carry a team on his back. The quote of the year came from him where he said, I just want to come in and kill whatever's in front of me. That's the kind of mentality that this Minnesota Timberwolves team has. Are they going to win it all this year? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, they're looking great against Denver right now. They're up 2-0 in the series, and they took 2 series from Denver. But as far as, can they beat – if they make it to the NBA Finals, and they face Boston most likely, will they be able to get through Boston? Anthony Edwards would have to put on the performances of his life in order to do so. But you know what? Watch how that Minnesota defense played against Denver. They were suffocating Nikola Jokic. They were suffocating Carl Anthony. They were suffocating Jamal Murray. They were suffocating all their top scorers. And Minnesota's got a lot of tall, lanky guys. Like, you got Carl Anthony Towns. You got a Rudy Gobert. You got a McDaniels. You got a lot of tall guys who are also young and full of energy on that Minnesota team. And I think Chris Finch is a really good coach. I think, really, you look at this Minnesota team, if they can keep all their pieces together and Chris Finch is the head coach long term, this Minnesota team is going to be an NBA champion one day. If not this year, maybe in the coming years, because they got it all put together. And they're slowly building up a foundation. And that foundation is looking pretty dang good right now. So, straight facts.
It would be disappointing to see Anthony Edwards leave Minnesota, especially him being one of those elite level players. I mean, being from Georgia, and the belief is that he's went to play in Georgia just because he wanted to stay closer to home. I mean, if he does go to a team like Atlanta, that's one thing. But if he goes to the Lakers like Anthony Davis and the Knicks like Carmelo Anthony and and so on, that would be a little disappointing to see. It'd be really cool to see Minnesota get to that place. But fellas, Pleasure is all mine as always. Maddie, I understand that I don't want to spoil anything for you, but apparently, hopefully the Rangers will do it tonight. I don't even know what if the game is still on, but the fact that your
Overtime.
team
They're
is
going overtime.
two apiece. Okay, all right. The fact that you came to hop on, especially with your Rangers in Game 2, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Dan, Tony, as always, it's always a pleasure. Really, thank you guys for everything, and to the three of you, let's do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
Perfect. For Tony Antoniou, Dan Leggieri, and Matt Siriani, I'm Randy Kure. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe. We will talk to you next time.